Far away, in some strange constellation in skies infinitely remote, there is a small star which astronomers may someday discover. At least I could never observe in the faces or demeanour of most astronomers or men of science any evidence that they have discovered it. Though as a matter of fact they were walking about on it all the time. It is a star that brings forth out of itself very strange plants and very strange animals, and none stranger than the men of science. That at least is the way in which I should begin a history of the world, if I had to follow the scientific custom of beginning with an account of the astronomical universe. I should try to see even this earth from the outside, not by the hackneyed insistence of its relative position to the sun, but by some imaginative effort to conceive its remote position for the dehumanized spectator. Only I do not believe in being dehumanized in order to study humanity. I do not believe in dwelling upon the distances that are supposed to dwarf the world. I think there is even something a trifle vulgar about this idea of trying to rebuke spirit by size. And as the first idea is not feasible, that of making the earth a strange planet so as to make it significant, I will not stoop to the other trick of making it a small planet in order to make it insignificant. I would rather insist that we do not even know that it is a planet at all, in the sense in which we know that it is a place, and a very extraordinary place too. That is the note which I wish to strike from the first, if not in the astronomical, then in some more familiar fashion. One of my first journalistic adventures, or misadventures, concerned a comment on Grant Allen, who had written a book about the evolution of the idea of God. I happened to remark that it would be much more interesting if God wrote a book about the evolution of the idea of Grant Allen. And I remember that the editor objected to my remark on the ground that it was blasphemous, which naturally amused me, not a little. For the joke of it was, of course, that it never occurred to him to notice the title of the book itself, which really was blasphemous. For it was, when translated into English, "I will show you how this nonsensical notion that there is God grew up among men." My remark was strictly pious and proper, confessing the divine purpose, even in its most seemingly dark or meaningless manifestations. In that hour, I learned many things, including the fact that there is something purely acoustic in much of that agnostic sort of reverence. The editor had not seen the point, because in the title of the book, the long word came at the beginning and the short word at the end, whereas in my comments the short word came at the beginning and gave him a sort of shock. I have noticed that if you put a word like God into the same sentence with a word like dog, these abrupt and angular words affect people like pistol shots. Whether you say that God made the dog or the dog made God does not seem to matter. That is only one of the sterile disputations of the two subtle theologians. But so long as you begin with a long word like evolution, the rest will roll harmlessly past. Very probably the editor had not read the whole of the title, for it is rather a long title, and he was rather a busy man. But this little incident has always lingered in my mind as a sort of parable. Most modern histories of mankind begin with the word evolution, and with a rather wordy exposition of evolution, for much the same reason that operated in this case. There is something slow and soothing and gradual about the word and even about the idea. As a matter of fact, it is not touching these primary things a very practical word or a very profitable idea. Nobody can imagine how nothing could turn into something. Nobody can get an inch nearer to it by explaining how something could turn into something else. It is really far more logical to start by saying, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Even if you only mean, in the beginning, some unthinkable power began some unthinkable process. For God is by its nature a name of mystery, and nobody ever supposed that man could imagine how a world was created any more than he could create one. But evolution really is mistaken for explanation. It has the fatal quality of leaving on many minds the impression that they do understand it and everything else, just as many of them live under a sort of illusion that they have read The Origin of Species. But this notion of something smooth and slow, like the ascent of a slope, is a great part of the illusion. It is an illogicality as well as an illusion, for slowness has really nothing to do with the question. An event is not any more intrinsically intelligible or unintelligible because of the pace at which it moves. For a man who does not believe in a miracle, a slow miracle would be just as incredible as a swift one. The Greek witch may have turned sailors to swine with a stroke of the wand. But to see a naval gentleman of our acquaintance looking a little more like a pig every day till he ended with 4 trotters and a curly tail would not be any more soothing. It might be rather more creepy and uncanny. The medieval wizard may have flown through the air from the top of a tower, but to see an old gentleman walking through the air in a leisurely and lounging manner would still seem to call for some explanation. Yet there runs through all the rationalistic treatment of history this curious and confused idea that difficulty is avoided, or even mystery eliminated, by dwelling on mere delay or on something dilatory in the processes of things. There will be something to be said upon particular examples elsewhere. The question here is the false atmosphere of facility and ease given by the mere suggestion of going slow. The sort of comfort that might be given to a nervous old woman travelling for the first time in a motor car. H.G. Wells has confessed to being a prophet. And in this matter, he was a prophet at his own expense. It is curious that his first fairy tale was a complete answer to his last book of history. The time machine destroyed in advance all comfortable conclusions founded on the mere relativity of time. In that sublime nightmare, the hero saw trees shoot up like green rockets, and vegetation spread visibly like a green conflagration, or the sun shoot across the sky from east to west with the swiftness of a meteor. Yet, in his sense, these things were quite as natural when they went swiftly. And in our sense, they are quite as supernatural when they go slowly. The ultimate question is why they go at all. And anybody who really understands that question will know that it always has been and always will be a religious question, or at any rate a philosophical or metaphysical question. And most certainly, he will not think the question answered by some substitution of gradual for abrupt change, or, in other words, by a merely relative question of the same story being spun out or rattled rapidly through, as can be done with any story at a cinema by turning a handle. Now, what is needed for these problems of primitive existence is something more like a primitive spirit. In calling up this vision of the first things, I would ask the reader to make with me a sort of experiment in simplicity. And by simplicity I do not mean stupidity, but rather the sort of clarity that sees things like life, rather than words like evolution. For this purpose, it would really be better to turn the handle of the time machine a little more quickly and see the grass growing and the trees springing up into the sky. If that experiment could contract and concentrate and make vivid the upshot of the whole affair. What we know, in a sense in which we know nothing else, is that the trees and the grass did grow, and that number of other extraordinary things do in fact happen. That queer creatures support themselves in the empty air by beating it with fans of various fantastic shapes. That other queer creatures steer themselves about alive under a load of mighty waters. That other queer creatures walk about on 4 legs, and that the queerest creature of all walks about on 2. These are things and not theories. And compared with them, evolution and the atom and even the solar system are merely theories. The matter here is one of history and not of philosophy, so that it need only be noted that no philosopher denies that a mystery still attaches to the 2 great transitions: the origin of the universe itself and the origin of the principle of life itself. Most philosophers have the enlightenment to add that a 3rd mystery attaches to the origin of man himself. In other words, a 3rd bridge was built across a 3rd abyss of the unthinkable, when there came into the world what we call reason and what we call will. Man is not merely an evolution, but rather a revolution. That he has a backbone or other parts upon a similar pattern to birds and fishes is an obvious fact, whatever be the meaning of the fact. But if we attempt to regard him, as it were, as a quadruped standing on his hind legs, we shall find what follows far more fantastic and subversive than if he were standing on his head.